is done singing, I believe, Aiden, you're going to be sharing some words with us. So, yeah, after Zach is done, you can come up.
All right, good morning, everybody. Hope you all are ready to sing. I think our first song will be number 31 in the red book there. Be still and know. Be still and know that 67. For the beauty of the earth, for the beauty of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our sacrifice of praise. For the beauty of each hour of the day and of the night, hill and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our sacrifice of praise. For thy church that evermore lifteth holy hands above, offering upon every shore her pure sacrifice of love. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our sacrifice of praise. All right, any children's song? This little light of mine? All right. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All right, is there any more? All right, if not, you can just be dismissed to your classes this time. Turn to 517. You all stand for this song as well. Take a couple selections after this. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful day, day I will never forget. After I wandered in darkness away, Jesus my Savior I met. Oh, our tender, compassionate friend. 7:18. We shall assemble on the mountain. We shall assemble at the throne with humble hearts into His presence. We bring an offering of song, glory and honor and dominion unto the Lamb, unto the King. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah. We sing the song of the redeemed. All right, thank you. Any more? I'll take one more. All right, we will sing 464. Because He lives. God sent His Son. They called Him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives.
Good morning to all of you. We have some special guests here this morning. I didn't know my whole family was coming. You should have warned me. It's kind of intimidating, not the whole family, but special welcome to a couple of grandsons there and their partners, and John and Anita. Welcome. They don't know my story much more than y'all do. Anita does. John maybe, a few of them. But when the other 2 weeks ago, when Sil asked me to fill in for him today, my mind went immediately to, I wanted to sometime share my story. I've entitled it, My Adoption and Quest for Identity. It's been going on for 81 years. And I think today will be the conclusion. Because I've met both sides of my relatives now, just 2 weeks ago. And excuse me, I hate when this happens. I'll be okay in a minute. But anyhow, I thought, now would be appropriate time to share when Sil asked me to. I think, as I was thinking about this, sharing today will probably be the last time I do this. And it kind of encapsulates my life. I think it will be a healing process. What's been going on for a little over 81 years now. This is the fourth time I'm sharing. The first two times were some years ago, just a brief information, I guess. Then about 6 years ago at Christian Life, I shared my story up to that point. Travis, you'll have to excuse me for repeating. So Travis might have been there. I'm not sure if he was or not. Anyhow. But we all have a story. And just because I'm telling mine this morning doesn't mean that it's special. It's just different. Not necessarily special, but different. I want to read 3 verses in Ephesians. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Christ, just as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world. We should be holy and without blame before him in love, having predestined us to the adoption as sons of Jesus Christ by himself according to the good pleasure of his will. So, sometimes we talk about adopted people being different from natural born children or whatever you want to call it. But the only difference I see is that adopted ones were maybe chosen, where those who were born maybe unplanned or whatever weren't as special. I don't know, but I don't feel any different than y'all as far as being adopted or not adopted. It's all the same to me. We have 4 adopted grandchildren, and I don't even know the difference. I mean, they're all our grandchildren. Some people have already asked me, you know what, I should stick by my notes. I better do that or we won't get done here today. We all have a story about ourselves, each one different from the other. My story is one of redemption, forgiveness, reconciliation, rejection, and finally acceptance. And I think today that will come to a culmination. It's all over. And I feel I not only feel accepted now by my biological relatives on both sides, but by Agape Assembly. You're also part of my family. If my story can minister to someone today, my goal of sharing has been achieved. Well, I was going to say, too, in the beginning, if you get bored and happen to fall asleep, Matthias will waken you in time for lunch. So remember that, Matthias. Story begins like this. I need to hold this paper up. I didn't know my eyes were this bad. But anyhow, begins like this. And also, not all these dates and years, might be accurate. They're just the best that I could remember. In the early spring of 1943, I think it was in May, probably, a young man named Atlee Kaufman, he was 22 years old, went to court his girlfriend, I guess. She was 18. Her name was Esther Yoder. And as a result of that date, in January of 1944, she had a baby boy. And you're looking at him. That was back in the days of bed courtship, I guess, and I don't know, whatever. She had just turned 19 when I was born. I never met my father. I didn't know who he was until about 15 years ago, and he had already died about 10 years earlier. And after I shared my story at CLM, Roy Yoder, Travis, you know who Roy is, he came to me and asked me who my dad was, his name, so I told him. And on our way home from church, my phone dinged, and I looked. You're not supposed to look at your phone while you're driving, but anyhow. And here was the obituary of my father. That was the first I ever knew. I knew the name, but that was it. So I'm grateful to Roy for what he started the process, I guess. And then from that obituary, I discovered that I had 5 sisters somewhere in Holmes County, northern Holmes County, near Fredericksburg, I guess it was. But I didn't plan to pursue that relationship. But I have now met them, all 5. The last one just 2 weeks ago. And that's why I think now is the time to tell the story. So if one includes both my biological families, my Yoder family, my Kaufman family, and my Miller family, there are 14 of us, 7 girls and 7 boys. So I do come from a large family, even though I was an only child for a long time. Esther, when I talk about Mom, that's my biological, that's my adopted mother. She was my mother. Esther Yoder was the lady that I was born to, but I never counted her as Mom, because my allegiance was to Fannie Miller. Homer and Fannie were my parents. And so going through this, if you get confused, Esther is my mother, Esther is my biological mother, Fannie is my mom. Okay. Esther's father, who was my grandfather, Andy Yoder, required her, forced her, whatever, to give me up for adoption. I guess he didn't want this little illegitimate guy running around the house to tarnish his relationship with the community and all, so he had her give me up. At 10 days old, there was a young Amish couple in the neighborhood just a mile away across the fields. I know where the farm is. And my grandfather, Andy, I never met him either. He never bothered to look me up or anything, so that gave me somewhat a feeling of rejection, because my father, Atlee Kaufman, never pursued it, and my grandfather, Andy Yoder, never pursued it. but that's okay. So he went over to their place, as I understand, and asked if they would be interested in taking a little baby. And so Esther gave me up at age 10 days. And I think when I was thinking about this, I thought about Abby and Alyssa just had babies. I'm sure Alyssa can relate to that. Giving up your baby at 10 days, not going to happen. So I never, in my growing up years, I never really thought about that because I didn't have a relationship with her. But I'm sure she missed me a lot more than I ever missed her because I had good parents and grew up like that. Sometimes adoption has a negative connotation, negative perception we have about adoption. And especially of those born illegitimately. When the word illegitimate comes to your mind, what's your first thought? Yay, that's good. I wish I was in. Probably not. And that's something I've had to deal with, but not to a great extent. It has already, what should I say, bothered me a little bit at times, but I don't get any vibes from y'all that you think I'm below anyone else. So I can't help it. Wasn't my idea. So anyhow, by the way, I just looked up this week, 40% of births in America are illegitimate. So it's getting more popular, I guess. Not good. Sometimes we hear people say they have 3 adopted children and 2 of their own. Don't say that around me. They're all their own. People sometimes ask, when did you find out you were adopted? I don't know. I don't remember. I just always knew it, I guess. I don't know. I do sort of remember one time my mom saying something about that they chose me, and so I'm special or something like that. So I'm not sure. I just always, actually growing up, I didn't know the difference. I thought I was their son, and I was too, for that matter. Homer and Fanny were my parents, regardless of by birth or adoption. Didn't make any difference to me. I do remember when we left Florida, they had a farewell for us, just informal at the fellowship hall there. And one of my good friends said, and I don't hold it against him even now, and I didn't then because I knew what he was coming from. He said about me, I knew he was adopted and never thought he would amount to much. So I'll let you figure out if I amount to anything or not. He didn't mean it. I mean, I know how he meant it. It was Reuben Miller, you know who I'm talking about. But it didn't bother me because I knew where it was coming from. But I think sometimes that's the feeling that I get or have gotten over the years, that some people think that because he's adopted, whatever. I don't know where I got this, some Anabaptist conference, the subject title was, Jesus was adopted and he turned out okay. Now, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, but I'm not sure he was adopted either for that matter, but I thought about that when I was preparing this. Now, this is the 4th edition and the final one, I think. So some of this was from years ago. I never had any feeling of unforgiveness toward Esther, but have had to deliberately work on forgiving my father and grandfather. Probably the larger problem was forgiving my grandfather for making her get rid of me. But actually, in retrospect, that was the best. I'm glad I was adopted, and I'm here. If she hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. All right. No feelings of animosity toward either of them, however, just curiosity. Always wondered who my birth father really was and what he looked like and what type of personality he had. Something adopted children always desired to know, but now through some special circumstances I now know, and I'll share more about that a little later. My grandfather nor father never bothered to visit me, and they knew where I lived and all that stuff. I didn't know where they lived. Well, I knew where my grandfather lived because I go by that place often. But anyhow, about 2 years after my birth, Esther, my mother, biological mother, married my adopted mother's brother. Got that? Say that again? No. My biological mother married my adopted mother's brother, which made her husband my uncle, and her other children my first cousins. All right? And that's how we grew up, knowing each other as first cousins. And I do not remember when I learned that they were my brothers, as I said earlier, but I'll tell you a little later as the story goes on. So for the next 60 years or so, that's how I related to them. In fact, on the family farm where I grew up, they just lived about 2 miles away. My Esther and her husband and her other children, five boys and 1 girl. So I had 5 brothers and a sister there. And so we were back and forth as kids, as first cousins, which didn't bother me in the least. Our paths would cross at various times at family reunions. When we went to the Yoder family reunion, her husband was a Yoder. He was a Yoder, she was a Yoder too. Anyhow, so my parents and I would go to these reunions, and I would see my mother there. But really, she was just a lady. I mean, I didn't really, y'all probably can't figure that out, but I didn't have any feelings for her at all. And I'm sure she did for me. But that's just how it was. It was at the end of 2018 that the Yoders began accepting me as a brother. I was 72 then, and that's fine. Esther would come to visit at the birth of each of our 3 children to bring the baby gift, because those were actually her grandchildren too, which showed that she wanted to be involved with her grandchildren to some degree at least. At age 4, my parents left the Amish church and joined the Mennonites, so I grew up a Mennonite. However, in a very, very strict setting, which some of you may be familiar with and others not. At age 14, my parents, along with several other families, left what is now the Fairlawn Mennonite Church. Back then it was Maysville. And they started a small church in Fredericksburg with very few young people, very few families. And that's where my life kind of started unraveling, because I had no friends. Well, I had one good friend. Nita remembers Larry Troyer. And we helped each other be bad. You know what I mean? We just weren't good boys. In fact, his brother and his dad both were pastors at our church, and that alone was not good. But his brother came to me one time blaming me for the way Larry lived. Well, I could blame him for how I lived. Anyhow, we both weren't good. Actually, my grandsons are here. Don't listen to this. Just tune that out. Aaron and Maisie are clear they're an hour away, so that means a lot for y'all to come. but it is a little bit intimidating too, for that matter. So anyhow, getting back to my subject. I had asked Jesus into my heart at age 11. I still remember that well. Was baptized. Conrad, I was baptized with Leroy. Lee, your uncle. By the way, Conrad's mom and I went to school together, and his brother. And so, anyhow. I didn't follow through with that commitment, however. 13, probably 14 is where it started. The wheels started coming off. I went to church 3 times a week, played the part, but I really wasn't following the Lord. And I kept this hidden, I think, from my parents, but my guess is they knew more about it than I thought they did, and just didn't say anything much. I didn't have any goals. I had very few friends, mainly that one, as I said, Larry. Larry and I were very close friends. I was alone most of the time at home. I still remember in the barn, we put up a basketball hoop, and I would play for hours. I made a foul line, and I got pretty good at making foul shots. Another thing I did, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I like to throw knives. I went downstairs in the barn, the wooden gate, and I got to where I could stick a knife backwards. I'm not bragging, that's just stupid, but anyhow, that's what I did. I never tried it on anybody, so thank goodness. Anyhow, I was an only child for about 12 years, and then my parents adopted a 1-year-old little girl, Shelley, Doris, and a 2-year-old boy, Dwayne. He's still living. Doris, my sister, died during COVID, and I'll get to that later. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm annoyed with myself because I can't stick with my notes, but anyhow, I'll do the best I can. Dwayne and I, my adopted brothers, we still stay in contact, and I count him as much my brother as anybody else. We call each other on our birthdays, or at least I do him. He does most of the time. In fact, wait. Let me get back to you. At age 18, my dad pretty much forced me to go to Bible school. It was not my idea. But I'm really, really glad I did, because that's, I could say, the main reason I am where I am. Along with the Lord, of course, first. Fortunately, I still had enough respect for him to obey, even though I had no interest in Bible school. That was the most important decision in my life, except giving my heart to Jesus. I got to be around Christian young people, and 2 of my friends decided that there was a young lady that I should get to know. But one problem existed. I was too bashful to ask anybody out. I had no clue how to ask them out for a date. I mean, I was way, way bashful. And so there was no way I was going to ask her. Of course, I had seen her around. I didn't know it at the time, but she was also looking me over. And she later told me that she enjoyed challenges and that I was a challenge, and I now think I was probably a greater challenge than she had anticipated. But we'll be married 60 years in April, so she was up to the challenge. So these 2 friends asked her if she would consider going on a date with me. The rest is history. Here we are. Three children, 13 grandchildren later. We did what was called long distance dating. That was every 2 weeks. I lived an hour away from her home. So every other weekend I would drive to Hartville. In the meantime, guess how we communicated? You guys don't even know how. We wrote letters, not on with a pencil and paper. That's how we communicated. And that's another thing that impressed her, was my ability to communicate via letters. So here we are. Ruby played a major role in making me who I am today. And here we go again. Accepting me as I was. That's what I was looking for, was acceptance. I didn't even know it. All right. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really looking for acceptance for many years, and Ruby was the one who accepted me as I was. I guess I was able to hide my current state of unbelief sufficiently for her to be unaware of it, but I also realized that I would have to change if I wanted to continue our relationship. So, I slowly began to change for the better and rededicated my life to the Lord, but still wasn't fully committed to Him, which was obvious to one of the pastors at Harvard Conservative Church. Connor, do you remember Uri Sharp? Yeah. Uri Sharp was a pastor there. He came to me one I think it was a Sunday evening after church, and gave me a warning, something to this effect, that if I didn't change completely, Ruby was going to sever our relationship. That was a wake-up call, because I didn't want to lose her. So there again, her influence, and I give credit to God, but her influence was part of that. I can't remember all the details, but I did begin to take my relationship with the Lord more seriously. Both of us had much growing to do spiritually, but by the grace of God, we are here. And thank you all for accepting us into your fellowship as you have. We are over the hill, as it were, but we're not under the hill yet. So fast forward now to my dad's funeral. He died in 1995 at age 79. I still remember getting a phone call about 11:30 at night. Anita, I think you were the one that called. Do you remember that? Yeah. Dwayne, my brother, tried to call. He didn't have my number, so he called you, and you called me, I think. Oh, okay. Jonathan was a baby. Okay. He died suddenly and unexpectedly of a massive stroke. He just, it killed him immediately. And so, talking about Dad's funeral now. So I was grieving for my dad, even though I never had a close relationship with him. He was a very stoic and stern person, as I remembered him. And the reason I didn't have a relationship with him wasn't all his fault. It was as much mine as his. But there was never any physical affection or gratitude or compliments from him for my hard work on the farm at home. But as I remember now, I grew up like that, didn't know any better. But I don't remember ever hearing my dad compliment me in any way of any kind. But that's okay. That's how he grew up. And so that's how I grew up. Mom was very kind, soft-hearted, but again, there was no physical affection from her until very much later in life, and I initiated that. I would sometimes ask, when I was little, Dad would go to town, and I would ask Mom to ask him if I could go along. So that was my relationship with my father. I was kind of afraid to ask him in a way. But I knew he loved me because he took good care of me and all of that. And I worked hard at home on the farm, and went to high school till sophomore, and then I wanted to work, so I got a job construction work, and I finished my high school through American School. Back in those days, that was the only home school that I knew of, from Chicago, Illinois. I worked in the day, studied at night, and I did get my diploma in May or whenever of '61. At age 17, he took me to Cleveland to look for a car, and he bought a 1959 Ford Galaxy. I wish I still had it, but anyhow, it was black and yellow. It did not stay yellow for long, trust me. It was 2 years old for $1,500. Can you imagine that? Now it'd be worth at least $15,000, but I didn't have it. A little bit about, this tells me what I was like then. That's a little bit before I met Ruby. We got home, and immediately I put 2 glass pipe mufflers on it, dual exhaust. My dad was not a happy camper, but they were on, so what was he going to do? Fender skirts, white wall tires, big dice hanging on the mirror. Remember all that? That was all taboo at the church I was going to, but I was me. We weren't allowed radios then, so I had to take the radio antenna off. But back in those days, you could easily work under the dash. So all I would do was pull it out. So I took it off the outside, took it off, pull it out under the dash, kept it in the car, left home, would open the window, stick it out the window, and plug it in, and away we go. Michael and Aaron, don't listen to this, okay? So that was my first car. Back to the funeral setting. After the funeral was over, 2 of my biological brothers, they would be half-brothers, but now we relate as brothers, came to me, I still remember, out in the driveway in my parents' home, and wondered if I would like to become part of their family. Well, they meant well, but the timing couldn't have been worse. I was grieving for my dad, who had just died suddenly, and so I wasn't a bit interested. But somehow, I don't know how, my mom found out about this, and she came to me and asked if I would like to connect with the Yoder family. And I assured her that I was not interested. I was loyal to her. She was my mom at that time, and the Yoder family was just another family here, my cousins. Because at that point, I still had very few, if any, feelings for Esther, and Eli was her husband. Then Mom died in '97. And after that, I felt more comfortable in relating to the Yoder family. But for the next 10 or 12 years, it was still cousins, you know. And I was getting older. By around 65, age 65, 63, 65, Ruby and I were invited to a Yoder family reunion. Now that Yoder, my immediate family, my brothers and sister and their children, it was that reunion. And I still remember, it was at a school in a basement. I remember walking in, and I felt very uncomfortable. Even they were my brothers and sister, but I didn't, and their children, whom I didn't know. And I found out at that setting that some of them hadn't told their children that they even had a brother. And I'll tell you what happened there in just a minute. We were in line getting food, like here, and one of my oldest, my brother next to me, his son was right in front of me or behind me or something, he asked me who I was and why I'm here. Duh. What was I supposed to say? I don't even remember what I said. I think I said something about I'm a good friend or something, I mean, or a cousin. That's one thing. I could always, depending on the setting, if I wanted people to know who I was, I could say brother. If I didn't, I'd say cousin. And it was legal. I mean, it was honest both ways. Anyhow, I don't know what he thought of my answer. Don't really care, I guess. That made me know that my brother had never told his children that he had another brother, and that kind of hurt a little bit temporarily. This brother closest to my age, he would be about 4 years younger than me, something like that. Seemed to have a bit more of a difficult time accepting me than the rest of them did for some reason. Maybe because he still is ultra strict. I mean, you know when I'm talking about strict, you know what I mean, I guess, and dress and all that. I don't know how he thought I was supposed to explain to his son who I was. But anyhow, that's all in the past now, and we're on good standing. All the Yoder nieces and nephews now know who I am. And I don't know them well at all, but anyhow. One time when we were visiting the Yoder home, Eli and Esther home, we began then to visit more and more. They lived in Stuarts Draft, Virginia. Esther's husband, Eli, came to me in private, wondering if I would agree to have a blood test done to determine if he was my father or not. So apparently Esther kept this secret somehow. I don't know all this because she died before I could ask all the questions I wanted to ask. So I agreed to that. But in the meantime, another issue developed. Two of my brothers, Andy and Alvin, contacted me and wondered if I would agree to meet with them and their parents at Deeper Life Ministries in Plain City. John Colbin's. Did any of you know John Colbin's? Deeper Life Ministries. He's not there anymore. He's at Faith Building. To meet there because I believe Esther had some anger problems, maybe due to her father forcing her to give up her son for adoption. I don't know what all played there. And she displayed this to her family. And I personally remember being in their presence, and she often correcting her husband. If he would make a mistake, this was in Dutch, so I won't say it, but anyhow, she would have a tendency to correct. She was a perfectionist, which I'm only a little bit, I hope. So we met there in John Colbin's counseling there. I still remember sitting at the table. And she asked me there, she asked if I held any animosity toward her or any unforgiveness for her giving me up for adoption. No, I did not. I was actually glad she did, I guess, because I grew up then with two parents as opposed to growing up with her as a single mom for temporarily until she got married and stuff. Anyhow, if I would have grown up in the Yoder family, I wouldn't be here either today. So anyhow, and at that meeting, as I recall, Esther admitted to Eli that he was not my dad. And that makes me think all those years she pretended like Eli was my father, rather than Atlee Kaufman, who is my father. And so that changed. We never had a blood test. And so some years later in private, Eli, her husband, came to me. I still remember in their dining room in Stuarts Draft, and told me, I think I was about 65 years old then, and told me that Atlee Kaufman really was my dad, whoever that was. But he had died some 10 years earlier, so there's no way of finding him. And that pretty much closed that chapter in my life. I gave up knowing who Kaufmans were. I didn't really pursue that. I knew who the Yoders were, and that was all that mattered in a way. And yet, I never lost the desire to find this other family, which I have now. So in the following years, we would get invited to Virginia to visit with the Yoder family, and I was privileged to be in a relationship with Esther. I never could call her mother because, as I explained earlier, because the mother I knew was the one who adopted me. With each subsequent visit, we got a little bit closer and learned a little bit more, and I got more, got to learn to know her a little bit better, more comfortable in her presence, and I began to sense a feeling of belonging there, in a way, because my parents had died. And so my allegiance was no longer on that side as much. And so the reconciliation and the redemptive process began its work, however slowly. This was between the ages of 65 and 70. At age 68, at the conclusion of our visit in Virginia, I still remember this, Ruby and Esther and I were out in the kitchen there, dining kitchen. And we were talking, and all of a sudden, Ruby says, "Why don't you give your mother a hug?" All right. So we did, and that was a kind of a shocker for me and for her too. But, well, I didn't have much choice. Let me stick with my notes. So I did it for the first time in 68 years that I hugged her. I could tell by her response that she was very glad to reciprocate. I physically felt that. She went over to the kitchen sink, pretending to have something in her eye. It was a tear. And that started my relationship with Esther. But it was very late. The next time we visited, we also hugged then again, and before we left for home. That was a combination of reconciliation, restoration, redemption, forgiveness, acceptance, the whole family of words. And I had planned to pursue that relationship to another level because I felt more comfortable. I was going to ask her some more personal questions, But on her 88th birthday, December 2013, she died. And so that was the end of me finding more out about her. Her father also died on his 88th birthday. Atlee Kaufman, my father, died on his 78th birthday. That's why I stay in bed all day on my birthday. Not. Oh, if I did, the ceiling would fall in. No, I'm not a bit superstitious. Don't worry, not a bit. That was, I was a month from 7 years old when she died. And so that gave me about 5 years or so to connect with her between that time. Just a bit of family trivia. Esther's parents were Andy and Anna Yoder. Fanny's parents were Andy and Anna Yoder also. So I had two grandparents the same name. At Esther's funeral, we decided that we probably wouldn't sit with the family because, hey, nobody knew that I existed except her children and one of my uncles whom I had never met, Uncle Jake. I'll have more about him in a little bit. And so we didn't want to expose her, having a illegitimate child and all that stuff on the Amish. Well, she wasn't Amish then anymore. They had also left the Amish in the meantime. So we decided that we wouldn't sit with the family, and that was okay with us. But then the rest of the brothers, the rest of the family would have been okay with us sitting with them, except this oldest Paul next to me. He said, let's just pretend, or let's just say your favorite cousin. Okay, whatever. I hadn't planned to sit with him anyhow. All of a sudden, I still remember we were all milling around there in the back of the church, waiting to come in to sit. And somebody, was it Anna? Somebody brought a letter to you. I was there too. And this letter, Esther had written some instructions for her funeral. And one of the instructions was that she wanted Aiden and Ruby to sit with the family. So that took care of that. Paul had to swallow that, and we actually sat on the same bench with them, so good for him. We're good friends now, so don't worry about it. I guess I had probably wondered many times in the past how this would work at the funeral with all the relatives present, and most of them, virtually all of them, not knowing I existed. Because I knew that Esther's family was all Amish, still are. I knew they would be at the funeral, and they seeing Ruby and me sitting with the family, they wondered, what's this? I knew for many years where the home place was and where I was born. In fact, that house is just now being torn down. And that an uncle had a buggy shop there, and we would go down 241, Conrad, Zerker Road. That's where I was born, that house back in the back. We'd go past there many, many times, and I always wondered, about that place. But I never stopped in. I didn't dare. At the funeral, my youngest brother found my Uncle Jake, and he was the first of that family to meet me. And I felt acceptance. Amish Uncle Jake he would have been 80 years old. He was 10 years older than me. And when my brother Tim told him he immediately wanted to meet this long-lost nephew. He was 10 years old when I was born, and he remembered that. I felt immediate acceptance. Now, all these relatives are from the Dangme. Dennis, are you familiar with that at all? There's about 4 or so levels of Amish, and the Dangme is down here somewhere, right above the Schwarzentroopers. Very, very strict. Like, for instance, they're not allowed to have vanities in their bathroom. It's out in the hallway. And the shirts aren't allowed to button down all the way, just to here. And they're not allowed to have bicycles and stuff like that. That's who my relatives are. But believe it or not, you'd never know. They all accept me like I was one of the Dangme, which I'm not, of course. But it's very, very comforting to me to be accepted like that from those kind of people. All of them. Anyhow, I'm getting all mixed up. Back to the funeral, suddenly the word got around that here's this guy that was Esther's son, and all these cousins never knew it. And so we were there in the hallway, and here they come, lined up. All these Amish. That was just overwhelming to me, to meet all these guys, and they were, I guess, glad to meet me. Now we're good friends. We go visit them, and one particular cousin is Anna and Amos from Apple Creek. We go to see them about every other month. They get free transportation, and we get free visiting, and so we're very good friends. So Uncle Jake died in last May, right, Anita? Anita happened to meet him about 2 weeks before he died suddenly, Uncle Jake. He's the last of that generation in both sides. And I'm the first of this generation of the Yoders. And I don't know about the Kaufmans. I haven't met enough of them yet. That time will come. This is going to be interesting. Uncle Jake left, leaving about 90 grandchildren and around 230 great-grandchildren. He took that verse in Genesis where it says, be fruitful and multiply. He took that to heart. And so anyhow, I don't know any of them. So. December 2017, two of my brothers and their wives invited Ruby and me to accompany them to Ireland to visit another brother, Dan. Wendell, you're familiar with that, right? Your brother's over there. Yeah. I wanted to meet your brother at the wedding, and I forgot. All right. Dan, my brother Dan, in fact, three of my brothers are preachers. Dan, who's a preacher over there, has lived there for 20, 25 years. So we went with two of my brothers to Ireland in, 2017. At that point, I was under the impression that I was to be included as a brother and no longer a cousin, which I felt comfortable doing that. They did too. But when we got there, they have a little convenience store, and we went to visit that store, and I don't know who was there. Someone was there, and Dan was introducing Andy and Paul, my brothers. He said, these are my cousins. Then I came along, no, these are my brothers, Andy and Paul. Then I came along and said, this is my cousin Aiden. That hurt, because I was now a brother. But I told him, I was okay, I guess, to a degree, but it did hurt somewhat. I was asked by him to have a devotional that Sunday morning in church, and I told him it's okay to introduce me as a cousin, which he did then on that Sunday. But it's still, I thought to myself, when we go back home, I'm going to be a cousin now. I'm not going to jump back and forth, brother here, cousin there, depending on the circumstances. That's too hurtful. So he introduced me as a cousin, and then I sat beside him when Paul, my other brother, was preaching. And I noticed that he was writing something here on a little note, and I tried to look over, and I couldn't see what it was. And then he showed it to me, and I read it, and this is what it said, to paraphrase. He asked me if it was okay if he went back up and told the church who I really was, that I was a brother, actually. So I said, let's go outside. I want to talk about this a little bit. So we went out for just a couple minutes, and I was okay with that, I guess, yeah. So I'm getting way mixed up here. Let me go on. For my devotional, let me back up. For my devotional, Ruby suggested I refer to the lineage of Jesus to show that a few of his ancestors, including Rahab and Ruth, were not part of the royal line, but were included in the royal line, which I did, and I think that may have spoken to him a little bit. I wasn't part of the royal line, the Yoder line, but I was, whatever. So apparently that ministered to him, so during the sermon, that's when he was writing this note. So when Paul completed his sermon, Dan got back up and introduced me as his brother. And that was a healing process again. And then let me see, this was very healing and redemptive and maybe worth the whole trip to Ireland, I don't know. Later, the other brother in West Virginia who had wanted me as a cousin at the funeral also told his church who I was. So currently, I am part of the Yoder family. We have a circle letter, which I don't like to write. I like to read. I don't like to write this letter, but we're part of that. And having said all that, however, I still want to recognize my adopted brother Dwayne in South Carolina. He is still my brother, even though we're not blood brothers at all. Adopted children are as much brothers and sisters as biological children. That's my theory. Often upon meeting strangers, I have not so much anymore, but I think that, let me back up. I think that many adopted people have an intrinsic feeling of rejection because the mother gave them away, which I had for a number of years, I guess. I don't really feel that much now, but still today, if I meet a stranger, within a few minutes of a conversation, I can tell whether I'm accepted in this guy's or lady or whatever, accepted in his circle or whatever. And when I feel not accepted, I immediately respond in kind. I say, oh, that's fine, just let's go our separate ways, and that's just how I am. That's probably not, is that Christ-like, Jason? I'll work on that. I am who I am. What did Paul say? I am who I am. I can't remember. All right, now, even though I'm a Miller, I feel part of the Yoder family. And now, for the final chapter of my story, I now feel part of the Kaufman family, coming slowly, slowly in. For the latest and final chapter of my story, Ruby and I became close friends with Amos and Anna Byler, whom I mentioned earlier. She was a Yoder cousin earlier. And would visit them near Apple Creek every other month or so, taking them here and there. They would plan for us to visit other Yoder cousins, Amish cousins. They'd make the plans ahead. Of course, in the Amish, you don't need to tell them you're coming. You just stop in. I don't particularly care for that at my house, but if you all come, I won't turn you away. But you know what I mean. So I got to learn to know many of them and would always feel welcome. Every home. I don't ever feel rejection from any home that we were in. Sometimes we're invited for a meal and all of that. One day, as we were riding along with Amos and Anna about 2 or 3 years ago, and I can't remember why, but I just suddenly told Amos who my father was, Atlee Kaufman. Had no clue where this would lead to. Not knowing that Amos went to school with my sisters, the Kaufman sisters. I have 5 Kaufman sisters. So he didn't tell me right away, but he started the gossip. It wasn't really gossip, but he started connecting or started informing some of these Kaufman cousins and nephews that these sisters had a brother out there. The sisters didn't know it. I was 70 years old then, I guess, or whatever. No, they were. I was almost 80, 78 or whatever. I had no clue where this would lead to. He didn't tell me, but slowly he began to contact the Kaufman relatives whom he knew He went to school with some of them, including the 5 sisters. Some time passed when I began to receive phone calls, just out of the blue. And I could always tell they were real hesitant in saying who they were. They wanted to make sure that I would accept them, I guess. I don't know. And often, one of the first words would be, "Kannst du Duits?" Can you talk Dutch? Yeah, I can Dutch. And then that was an opening. Since I think that my ability to talk Dutch is an opening into a lot of their lives. So I began to receive phone calls from a few Kaufman cousins, and subsequently began to be invited to visit them, always feeling a warm welcome again. We went to rest one time with Bill Troyer, who was a first cousin in Holmesville, and might have been the first. No, we visited cousin Dan. Was the first one, and then anyhow, on and on it went. When we were attending CLM, I had a first cousin there. We attended church together. We didn't even know we were cousins. Mary Troyer, you probably don't know her. She was a single lady, about 60 years old. I barely knew her. She called me one night, again, very hesitantly, and said, we're cousins. So I've met her. Well, I met her at church, didn't know who she was. Anyhow, about 2 years ago, 1 to 2 years ago, I discovered that one of my Yoder cousins, Raymond, his son, was married to one of my Kaufman sister's daughters. It gets more confusing as it goes. And when he found that out, then somehow through Amos, I guess, found out where I fit in there, Raymond contacted this sister, I forget which sister it was, to try to get her for us to meet. And I was really excited about that. Time went on and on and on, and didn't hear anything. And then one day we were on the phone, Amos and I guess, was on the phone. And I asked him about it, and he, very hesitant, he didn't want to tell me. He said, she is not interested. And so there again comes the rejection, when your own blood relatives don't want to meet you. So I said, well, it is what it is, you know. I was not going to pursue it. Let me quickly tell you one thing that's not in there. During this time, one time we were eating at Mrs. Yoder's, Amos and Anna and Ruby and I. We sat at a table here. There was another table, excuse my arm, like here. And we were here eating, and I saw 4 Amish women coming in with an English driver sitting down. Didn't pay any attention to it. And later on, I found out those were my sisters. And Amos didn't tell me. I'm still annoyed at him about that. But he went and told them who I was sitting right here at this table. So they could all view me. Sometimes when I get into these groups, everybody watches, I feel like a monkey at a zoo, you know. Anyhow. But he didn't tell me until we went up to the place to pay. Then he said, those girls back there are your sisters. Well, I wasn't going to go back, and that was not the time or the place. So I left it right for another year or two. I became resigned to the fact that they didn't want me or whatever. Didn't want to meet me, I should say. But during this time, I'm meeting cousins, different cousins, and about 5 months ago, 4, 5, 6, a nephew called me, Atlee Weaver. And about 2 weeks later, another nephew called me, David Miller. And Atlee Weaver is a son to my sister, obviously, because he's my nephew. And he said the girls are ready to meet. And that was really good. So it was August the 7th, about 2 months ago, on a Saturday, we went down to, this was at the home place, my father's home place, Atlee. A couple of girls still live there, so I don't understand all that anyhow. We went and met. But what the problem is, they always have a whole bunch of other relatives there. And that's very intimidating for me because they all know me, they know my name and all. I'm supposed to remember who all these guys are, and I can't do that. But it was a very good meeting. Met 4 of the sisters there and some other relatives, cousins, I guess, or whatever. Apparently, these the nephews and some of the cousins had been encouraging these sisters. It's time to meet, and I'm thinking maybe they felt ashamed because they're the sisters and they wouldn't meet, and their other relatives are willing to meet. I don't know. At this meeting, Atlee Weaver, the nephew, was in charge, made conversations flow well. We had a very good meeting. Then David Miller, the other nephew, called also and wanted a meeting at his place, and we met there just August the 9th. And that was the 5th sister. Let me explain to her that situation. Her name's Katie. The others, Mary, Maddie, Ida, whatever, anyhow. I have it all in the obituary. Anyhow, I'll learn to know them eventually. That sister had a severe stroke about 10 years ago, and to save her life, they removed half her brain, so she can't talk. And I didn't know how this would go, but David, my nephew, wanted me to meet her, his mom. So I did, and we went in there, and I think she actually could figure out who I was because she was smiling, reached out her hand to shake hands. So that was the final scene, or whatever. And so now I feel part of that family as well. To my knowledge, only 4 people in the world knew that Atlee Kaufman had a son. That was Eli, my biological mother's husband, and of course Esther, and Atlee, and me. As far as I know, he never told anybody all his life that he had a son. But now, as I was preparing this and thinking about this, I think that still asking me to take his place this Sunday and me being able to share this at this time completes the story. I don't need to share it anymore. I feel complete. I feel accepted. There's a Kaufman reunion coming up October the 19th, which we're invited to. By the way, there's a Yoder reunion, a Miller reunion, and a Kaufman reunion within 4 days. So I'll be done reunioning for quite a while, probably. Thank you for your attention. And I think this completes my story, and you church people accepting me as you have are also part of that. One word came to mind that kind of sums up this whole thing, and that word is cathartic. Cathartic is in part of my own definition, expressing one's pent-up emotions to achieve peace and contentment. So after 81 years, I feel at peace this morning. I thought of the little, on your cell phone, it asks you to update. You got that little circle with that little going around. That little circle is going around, and now it's updated. Thank you for your attention. Matthias, back to you.
Well, Aiden, thanks for sharing your story. It's vulnerable and it's not fun. I'm reminded of Jesus' work in your life and how you multiple times said, and even talking to you before today, I don't pick up on bitterness, and you're a better man than I am, because I'm sitting there and my heart's pounding and I'm just like, man, the unfairness of all this. So I'm sure your mom and your dad and your brothers, sisters that went along with all this back in the day, but specifically the men and your mom that thought this was a good idea to do this, it's just so messed up. There's not a lot of Jesus in their lives when somebody, out of fear of other men and women and what they think of them, they say, we're going to do this. And I look at little Malachi or Elise, and I think about giving them up at 10 days old, and because I didn't have self-control. And you know, what is that? People will forget, people will move on, and even if they don't, that's fine. It's not Malachi's fault that you're in this situation. And I got to say, like I said, it just tugs on my heart, the piety and the lack of Jesus in their lives, that they thought this was a good idea to do. And then as a side effect, that gives you a lot of trauma or baggage that you had to deal with all your life. And I feel you have done a good job with that, but that tugs on me a little bit. Something that stuck out to me was you don't have a better story than anyone else's. It's just different. And then something that I thought about while I was listening to you a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast on Sean Ryan, super good podcast, number 83. And he was interviewing Victor Marks, I want to say. And Victor had gone through some incredible trauma when he was ages 4 to 7, moved out, and grew up and like you, Aiden, made something of his life. And he has since started a ministry dedicated to helping children get out of abuse and trauma. And I believe his ministry is called Only Through God, or Through God All Things Are Possible, or something like that. So he's a follower of Jesus, and he said something. He was talking to an adoptee that was in juvie, and the guy was there because he had a lot of rage, didn't have self-control, and it just had a lot of rage. And Victor was able to understand that and not judge him. And so he was there talking with him, and he was like, you know what's really messed up is us adopted people are supposed to be grateful, we're supposed to be grateful for the trauma that being adopted gives you. It's the only trauma you're supposed to be grateful for. And I had to think of you, you're there, you're saying you're happy that this happened because you have your family and you have Ruby and all this good stuff. And I respect that. You're such a better man than myself. But I just thought again of how the unfairness that you're supposed to be grateful for this trauma that you didn't ask for. But anyways, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Is there any prayer requests that you guys would like to share at this time? This brings us to the praise and word, or the prayer and sharing time.
Well, not a prayer request, but I was accepted, but you are vitally used of God. In that way.
Thanks for sharing that, Conrad. Anything else? I think too often people wait till they're gathered around a casket to say how much somebody meant to them, so I really appreciate that.
A lot of people that we meet in prison are dealing with a lot of rejection. Some of it's from, many years ago. Others felt the rejection most when they got caught, exposed, and then their families were ashamed of them and rejected. Regardless of what,
Not, thank you for sharing again, Eden. I guess it is about lunchtime, so why don't we stand to our feet and we'll have a noon prayer. And Dennis, would you mind praying for the food and dismissing us? Thank you. You all are dismissed.